So, an absolutely terrifying franchise, and a franchise in which I really hope comes back at some point or another, and had a game in development and then obviously got canceled, was Silent Hills. Of course, Hideo Kojima's take on a significant, scary game, which I think could have been potentially one of the greatest horror games ever made. And of course, it got canceled, and it was, of course, known as PT at the time, playable teaser. But then, of course, they obviously was going to be a much bigger game, that being Silent Hills. Well, in this segment of the show, I want to talk about what happened to Silent Hill as a gaming franchise. Like, what happened to it, and will we ever see it return? Let's talk about it. So, an article that was written by John Canties, of course, of Gaming Bolt. Few video game franchises have reached the level of sheer notoriety of Silent Hill. Not only one of the most celebrated franchises in survival horror, but video games in general. For this, there are many reasons, but mostly this is due to Silent Hill's unique take on survival horror, a genre that, at the time of the first game's release, had mostly been limited to somewhat obscure point-and-click adventures on the PC and very few actual standout adventure-style experiences like Resident Evil and Alone in the Dark. Once the original Silent Hill was released in 1999 on the surprisingly successful Sony PlayStation, Konami quickly realized that they had a hit on their hands with the game. So this was an interesting development, as not much was expected of Team Silent, as they were largely a group of developers and artists that, for one reason or another, underperformed in other projects and were essentially lumped together into their own team, where they were regularly ignored and told to be silent, hence the somewhat insulting name of the team. So obviously, it had some very humble beginnings. Since Silent Hill was released so late in the PlayStation's lifespan, the sequel was to be released on its successor, the PlayStation 2. Here we would see yet another timeless classic from Team Silent in Silent Hill 2. This game eclipsed the first in every possible way and really pushed the boundaries of how dark and mature the themes could get in video games, all while also selling quite well and justifying the development of several more installments. The PlayStation 2 also saw the release of Silent Hill 3 and 4, which were quite good as well, although most would agree ultimately fell short of the masterpiece that was the second game. Still, the franchise was plenty popular after the fourth game. So, what happened to what happened? Even after the fourth game, it was still really popular. So, what happened? What happened to this franchise? Why did something go wrong here? Well, even though Team Silent was excited and willing to continue the franchise, the mid-2000s was a time when Konami was undergoing a lot of changes, and unfortunately, one of the major pieces of collateral damage was Konami's restructuring was the disbandment of Team Silent. Konami now wanted Western developers to make the Silent Hill games, and former members of Team Silent found themselves scattered throughout Konami, not unlike how they were before the team was formed. Some prominent members went to work on the excellent Siren series, which would later scratch a similar itch for Silent Hill fans. Many more members ended up in Kojima Productions, and some wound up joining Grasshopper Manufacture. So the chances of the team working on another proper Silent Hill game were essentially zero, as several other Western developers would now have their chance to carry on the legacy of the franchise that had now become a household name, and the results were mixed at best. So obviously, the first thing that kind of happened was, of course, Konami kind of splitting up Team Silent, right? Really, or disbanding the team as a whole. But then, of course, those team members kind of go in all their separate ways. And so whenever you do something along those lines, guys, and a developer is disbanded, obviously when you come back to the series and you don't have that original core crew of people working on it that are passionate about it, that are all in on it, and have actually brought a lot of success to the franchise, sometimes things go very well, and other times things go very poorly. It can kind of go one way or another. The first Western team to have a crack at Silent Hill was Climax Studios. They were tasked with making an origin story that would land on the PSP and later get a port to the PlayStation 2. Silent Hill Origins, or Silent Hill Zero, as it was known in Japan, was actually quite decent, and despite a slightly more dedicated focus on combat, felt pretty much at home with the previous entries. Of course, I don't find that to be particularly fair to the game, though, as it does mostly check the boxes of what makes a good Silent Hill game, albeit with less heart, perhaps. The real decline began with the following game, Silent Hill Homecoming on PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360. The game was roundly criticized for its boring main character and dramatic change in style that would now forego the tactic of the previous entries that would let an ominous thematic atmosphere slowly creep into the player's head in favor of jump scares and gross out moments that would come and go in an instant. At its core, Homecoming wasn't a bad game, it just wasn't a good Silent Hill game. So, look, this is where I came into the franchise, actually, guys, was Homecoming. I started playing Homecoming. I actually really thought it was good. I liked it a lot. I didn't have, I know it got a lot of bad reviews and things of that nature, but I guess I just didn't know any better. Because, I came into this franchise and Homecoming, I'm like, this is actually pretty good. And then, of course, the next entry was, of course, Downpour, which did an admirable job taking risk in making creative changes to the formula, and perhaps was better than Homecoming in some ways, but ultimately, this was not enough to keep longtime fans happy or capture the interest of many new ones, and since it was around this time that the completely botched HD remaster of the second and third game was released and a couple of mediocre at best movie adaptations, it was an objectively bad time for the franchise. Morale was low for longtime fans, and many would give up on the series at this point. Thankfully, newer survival horror games like Amnesia were taking their own waves, or were making their own waves in the genre, and it started to seem like maybe survival horror didn't need Team Silent anymore. So most gamers know the story of Silent Hills, or PT, at this point, so I won't bore you with litigating all of that. But essentially the whole world was teased with the Kojima-directed, Norman Reedus starring, and Del Toro advised first-person Silent Hill game. And due to some major differences between Hideo Kojima and his bosses at Konami that finally came to the surface at the end of development of Metal Gear Solid 5, Kojima and his team had abruptly split with Konami after decades of work together. This, of course, resulted in the complete and total shutdown of Silent Hills, and perhaps the greatest cumulative sigh of disappointment the gaming community has ever experienced together. And I will agree with that. Guys, when this happened, I was devastated, man. Like, it was terrible. When I found out that PT was actually going to be a continuation of the Silent Hill franchise, I thought to myself, man, this is so good. PT was so good. It was so creative, and I'm thinking to myself, I mean, if they do this correctly, and the direction they're going in, because it's Hideo Kojima, one of the greatest game developers of all time, this could be really special. And I don't know what happened between him and Konami. Obviously, they had differences. It's a really unfortunate thing what happened, because I would love to see what Silent Hills was going to look like. I think that the world deserved to see it and be able to play it and experience it, because they had been working on it for a while. But I guess we'll just never know, guys. The only thing that we'll ever have is PT, which of course has been taken off of the store by Hideo Kojima. Now, if the release of a few mediocre movies and games weren't what killed the franchise, then this surely did. Now, with so much universal animosity that gamers feel towards Konami as a result of the split with Kojima and the canceling of Silent Hills, I doubt that a Silent Hill game would sell well, even if it was good, which is a terrible place for Konami to put their fans, and the franchise is now in the worst position it has ever been in. The silver lining to all of this is that now Kojima and his team, of course, made Death Stranding. But the lingering question still remains. Will Silent Hill ever make a return? And obviously, guys, with Death Stranding, Kojima made a very good game in Death Stranding. A lot of people didn't enjoy Death Stranding for, just for a number of reasons, thinking it's a walking simulator and things of that nature. I thought it's a fantastic game. I thought it was very well done. I really enjoyed Death Stranding. I would have liked to see Silent Hills, though. I just do. I even to this day, I think to myself, man, what could have been so good of a game with Silent Hills. But we're never going to know. We'll just never know, unfortunately, unless Kojima decides to somehow make a spin-off of Silent Hills or something along those lines, which, of course, Konami owns the rights to Silent Hill, so it'd have to be somewhat different. I would love to see Hideo Kojima do a horror game, but maybe something completely separate from obviously Silent Hill. Well, we won't know, but I think really what happened to Silent Hill, guys, was, of course, them getting, disbanding Team Silent, and then, of course, having a couple of mediocre games. Even though I thought that they were pretty good, they were mediocre to diehard fans as well as, even critics and, reviewers alike. And then, of course, I think the nail in the coffin was significantly Konami and Kojima not getting along for Silent Hills, and then we'll never know what happened, what would have been there. But the question is do you guys think that we'll ever get a Silent Hill sequel? It's a big question, guys, and I think it's something that we should definitely have a real conversation about. Let me know in the comment section below. And for all future Silent Hill content for new games that may be coming out in the franchise, stay right here with Zero TV.